And we're live. Welcome to episode 5 of Pen and Stylus. Tonight's subject is going to be introduction to scripting for comics. My name is Nathan Rackley. I'm your host, and together I'm here with three co-hosts tonight. Of course, we've got John. Well, we've got Jen and her husband.
Hello.
John. So this is John and Jenn Myers. And then we've also got Ben Girven joining us again. Say hello, Ben. Or not.
Hello, Ben.
Anyway, lag. So we are going to be learning from John tonight. Yeah, that's fine.
Trying to get too many things going. So, hello.
Whenever we start the streams, it's always like, because we have the YouTube stuff loaded up and things so that we can see the comments.
Yeah.
Usually there's like 10 things at once, so it's like you hear people speaking 4 times on the stream, which is why I've got headphones on. But yeah, so we've got John joining us tonight. John is actually a writer. He's going to talk more about himself, and he's actually going to give us this presentation on scripting comics. Isn't that right, John?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so you want to go ahead and jump in? Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. So, my name is John Myers. I am one of the co-publishers for typoedmary.com. We've been doing a number of comics for print and the web, and I've worked with I'm working with 3 local artists in Albuquerque right now, including Jen and Ben, who've both been incredibly tolerant of me and willingness to work with put up with my creative madness. And so my goal really with this presentation is just sort of to give an overview for anyone who might be sort of intimidated or sort of overwhelmed about the process of putting together a script for comics, for no other reason than there's not a lot of rules or guidelines for it, and it's actually kind of a hard thing if you start doing research on it to find sort of a definitive way to produce a comic script. So for me, it was really intimidating to start doing it, and I had to experiment with a lot of different kind of methods and solutions for putting together comics until I started finding ones that I liked better than others. So yeah, I mean, and a lot of it was basically happened through trial and error. So with any luck, learning from my mistakes will maybe help some people out there. That's generally my goal, is to save people from having to fail upwards quite as much as I have as we've sort of figured this thing out. But yeah, so definitely. So definitely just want to start with kind of a basic overview. And then if anyone had either Ben or Jen or Nathan, if you guys have any questions, or if anyone on the feed has questions, feel free to chime in. I'd way rather speak to other people's issues or concerns than just drone on about my own rambling. I do have a sort of short little packet that we're going to post a link to as a PDF. It's basically just some of the notes I'm using, and it's got a couple of what I think are sort of helpful links that, again, were sort of things that helped me sort of figure this out as I went along. Let me start with the absolute basics, which is what is a script for comics? Well, the thing that actually kind of makes it hard is that unlike a screenplay or an article or a novel, there's no set rules or real guidelines. There's not. If you write a screenplay, there's a format you are required to follow, and if you deviate from that format, no one will read it, and it will get thrown away almost immediately if you're trying to submit it to anyone other than maybe for your own general use. And even like articles and novels generally have rules and guides for how you need to submit them and how you need to structure them to make sure that people take them seriously and look at them and follow them clearly. Because a comic script, especially when you're a writer trying to communicate with an artist, you're basically creating almost something more similar to a blueprint that helps facilitate that communication. So you don't really have a set of rules for how to do that. So there is sort of the default screenplay, or the default format for comics sort of takes its guides from screenplays, and it uses that same kind of structure with description, followed by character breakouts, followed by dialogue. But that's by no means definitive, and is by no means what's used universally throughout the field or the industry.
The ships engage.
Yeah, there's a lot of great stories about how not to script comics. There's one I like a lot that Warren Ellis loves to tell about. There's a beautiful 2-page spread in like the 5th issue of a series he did with Brian Hitch called Planetary, where all these spaceships and all these F-15s all engage, and it's this huge fight between all of them. And it's a ton of detail. It's taking place over Los Angeles, and you can see the whole city. And the way Warren Ellis tells it is it took Brian Hitch probably 2 months to draw that 2-page spread, and from Ellis's point of view, basically all it was 2 words: the ships engage. Yeah, 3 words.
Sorry.
No. Writer, not a math guy. But so one of the things that separates comics from a lot of other media, or comic scripting from a lot of other media, is sort of the directness of the communication. If you create a novel or a poem, you're basically communicating almost directly with the reader. You may have an editor or feedback to sort of as a filter in there, but it's basically one-to-one. If I describe someone going to a house, knocking on the door, someone answers the door in a novel, that's basically what the reader gets. If you produce, the other end of it is if you produce a play or a screenplay, especially a screenplay like a large budget movie, that's a piece of writing that gets filtered through dozens, if possibly even hundreds of people, including the director, the actors, the cinematographers, the editor. Yeah. The joke is about how little effect the screenwriter has on the overall film. I mean, there's a lot of screenwriters who tell stories about going to see their screenplays get produced and hoping to see 25-30% of the final product, or of the screenplay show up in the final product. Wow. Comics are basically filtered filtered through 1 or 2 people. You basically have the writer, then who filters it to the artist, and even if the writer and the artist are the same person, it's still getting filtered from script to art. And then you have a few other contributors, including inkers and colorists, that can all leave a footprint on it, but it's still essentially I'm trying to communicate an idea to another person who then has final responsibility for visualizing that. And if you think about how much of a challenge that is, the best way I think about it is if you've ever tried to explain a really intense dream to someone, no matter how emotionally powerful or engaging some experience was, within the confines of your own head, trying to get someone else to understand that can be incredibly challenging. That's why, the rules of polite conversation is don't talk about your dreams because they're boring to everybody but you. And so trying to communicate a story that, especially visually, is really powerful in your own head to someone else who then has the challenge of visualizing that, is really, really difficult, and it's the fundamental part of comic scripting. So that's basically the goal that your script has. The goal of your script is to create something that is understandable to the person who has to read it, and then come up with a way to visualize it. Mm-hmm. And essentially, and this is always sort of my final point, is because there are no specific rules, anything that at the end of the day generates a good comic is a good comic script.
Yeah, so I know I've looked at a lot of example scripts on the internet and elsewhere, and I've seen that a lot of people have their own style, they have their own methodology behind how they produce their script. I have my own way of doing scripts for my projects, which they do look quite a bit like screenplays, but there are some different things in there. But I've also noticed, just looking at because some of the major comic book companies, Marvel, DC, Dark Horse, a lot of times if you are a prospective artist, I've noticed like you can go and sometimes you can get sample scripts
Yeah,
that they want you to draw to, and they're all different. Like the styles are different, the formatting's different. So one of my questions then for you, John, is so what are the essential components to a script? What are the things that you consider to be the most essential to pass on your vision to, for example, the illustrator?
well, and that sort of talks to sort of the bigger point, and which is essentially the goal. This goal is communication. So no matter how involved the format is, or how strictly you follow the format, if you end up describing something that the artist has no interest in drawing, or no ability to draw, or just cannot visualize themselves,
Mm-hmm.
then it's a bad script. So Marvel and DC and Dark Horse all have their own very specific rules. Marvel's famous for the Marvel method, which was basically the writer would come up with a short sort of synopsis, and then their artist would draw it and then put in the word balloons, and then the writer would go back and then fill that in, and have to sort of fill in the dialogue based on the writer's sort of attempts to visualize their story. And then there was sort of a backlash in the late '90s, early 2000s against that, and sort of stories need to be more controlled by the writer. Comics need to be more writerly. So, which is how you got to that stronger screenplay format, or even more, like way more descriptive, almost novelistic scripts. There's a lot of debate about what the best way to do that is, and I think a lot of that comes down to how the writer and the artist work well together. One of the things Jen and I have talked about is that her visual sense is a lot better than mine, so I'm perfectly happy. Well, a lot better. I'm perfectly happy to hand over a lot of that to her. I don't mind letting her figure out the panel breakdowns. I don't mind letting her figure out how to even visualize the characters beyond very, very basic details.
I also can't deal with panel breakdowns just because I see that and it just it makes me panic that I'm not going to do it right. So if he gives me whatever I want to do, then we're good.
Yeah. Sorry, Nathan.
I was just going to ask. So are panel breakdowns a common thing in professional scripts?
Usually basically outside of Marvel, if you want to submit to a publisher, you probably want to have panel breakdowns because that's what they like to see, because they may really, really be interested in controlling your communication with the artist. A lot of publishers don't necessarily want the writer and artist to talk directly to each other. They want to have a lot more control over that. Again, it's one of those things where if you're just working between you and the writer and the artist, it's a creator-owned project, then I think it comes down a lot more to personal taste.
Yeah, because Ben, you like having panel breakdowns, right? Or you like being told what to do? I mean, not like that. I just mean like.
Ask my wife. No, no, I'm kidding. I kind of a little bit of both. I mean, I like to personally. I like to kind of see the big picture first, and then I think from there it really kind of depends on the project to an extent, but I really like kind of getting that first kind of overview. This is what's going to happen, and then. Actually, truth be told, I think I'm kind of more on your side of the fence. I think at this point I just kind of like getting the script and then me looking through it and basically pacing it out myself because, I've noticed one thing about me is that I know my pacing is really slow. I like to draw things out. I haven't really learned that trick of doing a lot of really fast action yet, so I like to kind of really take my time and have each kind of panel represent a moment. And I guess this is a good time to bring up the story of the script you gave me, in that the second issue of Terra Farmers that I'm working on. When John initially gave me the script for that, I think it was 11 pages or 10 or 11 pages, and I went through it. And basically started breaking it down, trying to figure out okay, how's the timing, how's the pacing, which panel, how am I going to break each one of these panels down? And I think I came back to you and said, yeah, this is 32 pages. And part of that's just knowing, okay, looking at what's presented, looking at the story and how things happen and sequence, and looking specifically, okay, well, this is a moment I can capture, and this is a moment I can capture, and this is a moment I can capture. And I went through the initial thing and just highlighted, like, okay, here's one panel, and here's another panel, and here's another panel. And so, by my counting, like I said, I ended up about 32 pages from an original script of like 10 or 11. So.
Yeah, he did the same thing to me. He gave me a 60-page manuscript, and he's like, "Oh, this is like the first half of the story, and it's probably just And I'm like, "Oh my God, I think I'm like in 140 pages now, and I'm only like a quarter of the way through his manuscript."
Yeah. Well, and I think part of that's just the communication. Like John was talking about, the communication between the artist and the writer. The writer has the ideas, and that's important. I mean, you have to kind of lay down that foundation and that the path, really. I think then it kind of hands off to the artist, and depending on the relationship between the two. I mean, you have the Alan Moore type writer who is very specific about everything. This is what you will draw, no exceptions. But in lieu of that kind of arrangement, I think it's really important to have some sort of communication back and forth, and the writers think about hopefully like the overall story, whereas the artists are specifically looking at one sequence, one object, one scene, really. So I mean, we're trying to break down, okay, we've got this much text, how do I filter one thing out of that's going to make that panel kind of work?
A good way of sort of describing it is that the writer generates the problem. It's left to the artist to figure out how to solve the problem.
Sure. Yeah. But I think depending on the relationship, there's a lot of trust. I mean, you're handing me or Jen or somebody else this project. This is my dream. You figure out how to make it work, and make sure you do it right.
Well, I think that does raise another relatively important thing, and that is, when you're scripting a comic or when you're putting together a project like this, it is very much a collaboration between yourself and someone else. And so when you're preparing a script, you do have to keep in mind, someone else is going to take this, and they might do your vision in your mind justice, or they might not.
Right.
And so we have talked about communication. Being able to communicate with an artist or communicate with a person you're working with, if you're working with someone else, is very, very important. And making sure that you stay on the same page seems to be a vital part of the entire process.
Well, and I think. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Oh, well, I was going to say, I think the other part of that is again that trust and being open to suggestions from both sides, and that classic example of the writer will write that paragraph that says, okay, scene 1, panel 1, or page 1, panel 1, Joe Schmo grabs his keys, takes a drink of water, yells at his cat, and walks out the front door. That's 4 panels. I mean, how do you break those things down? And again, the writer hopefully is just plotting forward. This is what happens. This is what happens. This is what happens. This is what happens. Like I said, it kind of falls back on the artist to represent that.
No, I think that's what you're going to say. Pretty much the same thing. Is that key concept there is trust. And the willingness to share the artistic endeavor, right? I mean, you got to be willing to say, not only is this my vision, but this is also someone else's vision, and we're also sharing in the labor. And again, I think one of the problems I think a lot of writers who are not also artists have is it's really easy to underestimate how much physical labor goes into the art side of it compared to the writing side. I mean, writing's work. It takes time and energy. but just physically compared to the actual art chores,
Absolutely.
pretty negligible. Yeah, I mean,
not negligible, but yes, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, I guess as a ratio. We've talked about it. I mean, I can produce scripts for 3 or 4 artists while everybody else has to kind of focus on 1 or 2 projects at one time because it's time consuming and physically draining. And
I'm currently working on a project myself for the University of New Mexico, and it's one of the first times that I've actually, as an artist, been working with a script writer who, where I am not the script writer of the piece, and so
right.
it definitely has been, I've been on the receiving end of that, we want these 17 scenes done, and we want them by next Tuesday. It's like, well, I can't get you the 17 scenes by Tuesday.
Sure.
It's like it's a graphic novel type project. Yeah. It's like I can't get that much, and explain because these are the person that we have writing. He's a screenwriter. He isn't familiar with the comic art format, and so, or at least he wasn't at the beginning. And so, it was definitely a dialogue to try and explain, how long each of these pieces takes. And so, I know as an artist, and for any of you who are artists working with a writer, one of the things I did to just kind of show what the process was is I actually sat down and I sketched out like one panel live in front of the team, saying, okay, here's I'm going to pencil this, I'm going to ink this, so that way they could understand really how much thought and effort has to go in. If there's less description, how much more effort has to go in on the artist's end to fill in the blanks. Now, sometimes as an artist, you like being able to fill in the blanks. Being able to add your own flair and your own taste and your own flavor to a piece might be what you want. But sometimes, if you're doing a big project and you're working on consistency and other things, sometimes it's also very important for the writer to really be specific about what they're wanting. Especially if you're limited on time or on resources. At least that's something I found.
Yeah.
No, I think that's an excellent point. And again, it really does come down to that communication. Again, it's how much guidance does the artist want, and I think the key issue really is how much does the artist want, not necessarily how much does the writer want to offer, because it's that idea that it's left to the artist to solve the problem, and Before we go too far, I think it's nearly impossible to discuss this without telling that story about Alan Moore writing V for Vendetta. Every time we talk about this, I tell this story. I'm sure people have gotten really tired of it. But
oh no.
So there's a fairly famous story. Alan Moore is working on the script for V for Vendetta, and like Ben was saying, Alan Moore's scripts are single-spaced novellas that are dozens or hundreds of pages for 22-issue comics. I mean, they're Dude sends his artist the Necronomicon and expects them to put it together in their free time. So David Lloyd loves to tell the story about getting a script for V for Vendetta, where the main character V, who always wears a theater-style mask that covers his entire face, is facing away from the camera, and we can see an evil smirk. Critically, you cannot see his face in any way, shape, or form because of both the mask and the fact that he's facing away from the camera. So, understand it's very, very easy to fall into that trap of here's my idea and then expecting someone else to figure out how to solve that problem.
Exactly.
There's another good story, I guess. Mark Wade likes to tell, and I need to actually find them. When he teaches scripting classes, and one of the things he likes to talk about is he'll show a page from another Alan Moore comic called From Hell, which is 2 characters walking on a beach, just having a conversation, and same kind of thing. It's
Byron? Byron and Shelley, like he always.
Oh no! That's the Invisible Snowy guy. No, you're fine. No. It's they're talking on the beach, and again, for 2 characters to walk along a beach and have 3 pages of dialogue, it's 20 pages, and it's a single-spaced, and it's, dense like something by Proust. But, and then he likes to also show a script by Garth Ennis, who, does a lot more action-heavy, very tight dialogue scripts. which is again two characters walking on a beach having a conversation, and it barely fills a page. And and Wade's point is these are both good scripts. These both turned into really good comics.
Mhm.
These are two completely different ways of generating basically the same thing. And again, it comes down to both people's willingness to put up with Alan Moore's madness, and Garth Ennis' ability to deal with.
And it is madness.
Yeah, well, I mean, you play a seminal role in the evolution of an art form. I think people are willing to put up with a lot more of that.
Sure.
And I think that's also a mistake a lot of writers make, which is that you're probably not playing a seminal role in the evolution of the art form. So you have to be fairly realistic about what people are willing to put up with.
Yeah, you're not Alan Moore.
You are not Alan Moore. And which honestly, in the long run, is probably for the best.
But
Yes.
Alan Moore did it. He got away with it. Yeah, no, not you. Yeah. All right. So then we've talked a lot about communication and about working together as a team. So then, are there any particular pieces of advice then as far as formulating a script or taking a concept and putting it into script form?
Yeah. Again, a big component of that is is the back and forth. So I almost always start with either outlines or summaries that me and the artist can sort of pass back and forth and sort of make up notes and make sure we have we are on the same page. And like in Ben's case, I've given him fairly detailed outlines for about a third of the overall story, so I can at least try and get his feedback before I even start scripting. And so, and then again, it just sort of comes to feeling it out. One of the reasons I wanted to sort of share this packet is that I actually have samples both of the script I'm doing with Ben for Terraformers, which does use that sort of fairly traditional panel breakdown screenplay inspired format, and the script I'm giving Jen for Era of Great Wonders, which is much more almost novelistic. Like, there's not a ton of scene description or he said emotional or angrily or anything like that, but it is a very short description of the scene, and then most of the dialogue and the characters and Jen sort of picks it up from the narration, and again I let her sort of fill it in because we started having conversations about what worked well for both of us, and I think she feels like that lets her express herself creatively a lot more, and frankly plays better probably to my strengths, which are probably hopefully dialogue and plotting.
Yeah. So I'm curious. Do you put any sort of camera direction in your scripts when you're producing? Because I know when I do mine, I actually will talk about camera direction in my scripts, like medium shot or close up view of stuff like that. Is that something that you put in yours? Is that something that you think is very necessary?
I'm not big on it, but again, a lot of that has to do with my general ability to sort of visualize stuff, and it seems more like a good way for me to get in trouble than it is to create a great script. Sometimes I'll include stuff like reaction shots, especially like if somebody's facial response is a big deal. That's usually something I'll include. But overhead shots or what do you call it? Act of God or look of God. Where you have where the camera's looking straight down, you can see the top of people. For me, that seems like that's a really good way for me to end up describing something, wearing the mask, looking away from the camera and smiling kind of thing. It's easy for me to get lost in those visuals.
So what you're saying is, if there's a importance to an emphasis, something's important that you describe it or that you show it, and it's I need to call this one thing out, then you'll explicitly mention it for a panel, but otherwise you kind of leave some of that direction over to the artist.
And some of that's, I have a very tense devotion to that whole idea of show don't tell. So I'm hoping that if something like that is important, it'll sort of come across in the tone and style of the story as it is. if there is a sense that the camera needs to be tight to create tension, or the camera needs to be far away to create epic scope, or something like that, then hopefully that's already there. And that if the artist isn't inferring it, then that's probably a mistake on my part, anyways.
So that's all very interesting stuff. Was there anything else that you wanted to share this evening about? I mean, we will be sharing obviously the material packet. We'll link to that in the description on the YouTube channel, as well as we'll link it in the journal over on the DeviantArt page. But is there anything else you wanted to share?
Yeah, I'll just hit a couple more key points.
You want your speaker file?
Let me do that in 1 second, but that's good. Yeah, that's the big part. So yeah, in the packet, I also mentioned a couple of resources. There's a comic book script archive where you can look up basically scripts from tons of professionals and stuff like that. And then there's a podcast I really recommend from Karen Gillian, who does a lot of work for Marvel right now, and his creator-owned series is called The Wicked and the Divine. But it's a comics podcast where he generally interviews professionals that doesn't focus on like news or even specifically talking about upcoming projects or anything like that, and instead focuses heavily on what he calls process.
Yeah.
And basically, he'll interview a writer and basically say, how did you go about telling the story, and how did you conceptualize it? And some of the ones I've called out are some of the best ones, where he'll have a writer and an artist together and sort of talk about how they helped formulate that communication and how that sort of back and forth happened. I've gotten a couple of really good kind of aha moments from it. There's a really good one where he talks to Matt Fraction and Mark Waid, where they talk about changing scripting styles and moving away from that very detailed, I need the artist to visualize, my vision, and moving more towards figuring out a good way to give up a lot of that control in favor of getting really strong visuals out of it. Matt Fraction has a really good moment that really clicked for me, which is, he's talking about why in the past he's been reluctant to do that, and he suddenly clicked. It's like, well, the real reason is probably my ego, because if the writer goes and draws something really cool, or the artist draws something really cool, and it wasn't something I told them to do, that means I don't get credit for that. People don't see how brilliant I am, and that's a big part of it. It's a collaborative medium. The artist is just as capable and important, and then that's sort of creating great moments and great visuals. And then the other really good moment is again with Matt Fraction, and they talk with David Aha, who was his artist when he was working on Hawkeye. Beautiful artist. And Aha was talking about how he grew up reading Marvel comics before he even really read English, and how that wasn't really a major issue for him because he basically was only looking at the pictures anyways. And the writing was largely negligible, and it made me realize that I'd probably been reading comics for 10 years before I was able to call out different artists or recognize different art styles. I mean, I was basically reading word balloons and using the pictures to realize, okay, this is where everybody's standing. And again, I think that's a really important clue in the way that people who create art and any kind of collaborative medium all have sort of different ways of thinking about it and understanding those relationships.
Well, and kind of how you come to it too. I mean, what we each kind of take out of it, as fans before we even become creators. Because I hear what you're saying. I'm exactly the opposite. I mean, I almost care less about the story and more about the art. All through high school when I was reading comics, it was all, I had my favorite artists and I'd follow them specifically, regardless of what book they might be on. And the story was always kind of secondary. So it's kind of funny.
Yeah, Ben, so marrying John means I have to read his comic book collection in order to have conversations, and they are so wordy.
Yeah.
Like, he's trying to get me to read The Invisibles, and it's good, but yeah, there's a scene where they're on the beach. Like, apparently every writer writes this scene where two characters are on the beach. And you're just like, Oh God.
It's probably a film school exercise or something like that. Actually, that's actually, I keep trying to push Jen through the invisibles because when it switches from the first volume to the second volume, it gets way more visual, which is actually kind of an interesting case study in and of itself.
Yeah.
That was a big thing for me too, was making the transition from this is writing I like to this is art I like to understanding storytelling I like, and understanding that the real challenge in comics is not, good words and word balloons or good narration, and it's not just cool images in the panels that make up for cool pinups. It's really figuring out how to put all those pieces together into something exciting and dynamic. And then one other thing I was going to talk about, if we can do a screen share real fast.
Do you want it over here, or do you want it over here?
Whatever's easiest.
What's easier for you?
Let's move it over here.
Over here? Okay,
Yeah.
cool. So we're gonna do this, and hopefully not be too under screen share. Boom. We'll do this one. And switch this over here.
It's loading. Okay, I can see your screen.
I'm moving stuff around.
Yeah.
Ooh, scripts.
There you go.
Can you guys see that?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so this is so I'm hoping maybe later down the line I'll do a full tutorial on this, but this is Scrivener, which is originally I think it was created to help people generate novels, but it's also got a script or a template created by the comic book writer Anthony Johnston as sort of a default comic script, so it helps you do all of this layout. You can see where you have the page and the panel and the little panel description, and then the character name and the dialogue and the panel, and then you pull this breakdown that makes it obviously a lot easier than trying to format that in something like Word or OpenOffice. But the real power of Scrivener, and Jen's the one who got me hooked on this, and why it's almost like a Scientology-esque cult for me now, is if you look over here, it's got basically
Over on the left.
on the left, sorry, yeah. If you look over on the left, it's got tabs that basically help you organize every component of it. So right now, I can call. So I've got, for example, I've got all the characters, which includes both their names and a little bit of character background. And all I have to do is click on that name to
If you
call
get
that.
from Ben, you can actually put their pictures in here.
Yeah, which is something I really should do. Jen's absolutely right. You can absolutely include it right, or you can include art and all that information. And so
That's cool.
yeah, no, it's really cool. You can even when you're doing it as a research section, I've actually put just direct links to Wikipedia pages, and all I got to do is click on it, and it'll take me right there. I'm not doing that with Terra Farmers, but yeah. So, and then the other thing is, and this is another thing that's incredibly powerful. If you look over on the other side, on the right, like I said, when I first started working on Terra Farmers with Ben, I made sure to get a fairly detailed outline to him, so I get as much feedback from him as possible. Well, now that I'm working on the actual script, I can actually have the outline available on the other side, so I can always refer back to that without having to click to another screen or tab. Yeah, I can basically have all that information at my fingertips without really having to switch to another program or anything else, which is super helpful. I haven't actually gotten Era of Great Wonders organized for this, but the way Era is structured is that it's a lot of vignettes, and it cuts between a lot of groups of characters. So putting it in Scrivener is going to be like a 2-day process.
Yeah.
But I mean, I was just doing it in OpenOffice, which meant anytime I shifted back to another character or another scene description, the only way to find that information was just scroll up through or do a Control F, even just for something really simple like finding someone's name or the name of a location or something like that.
Yeah.
So having all that stuff at my fingertips saves a ton of time and a ton of energy. So it's only about $40. You get 5 licenses for that.
Yeah, I think you can use it on 5 different computers, and they have a 30-day trial.
Yeah.
The 30-day trial is not actually 30 days; it's how many times you open it up. So you leave it open, each time you open it counts as 1 day.
Yeah, so it's pretty comprehensive, and
it does have a tutorial that they say takes a couple hours. It's a lie. Do not do that. I mean, it takes each section takes 2 to 3 hours, and do not rush it.
And that is, Jen's absolutely right. That is the biggest problem. The biggest challenge with Scrivener is there is a learning curve. When I sat down to start messing with it, I was like, I've used word processing software and content management systems. I don't need it. No. It definitely took me a couple of days to go through the whole tutorial.
And when you do the tutorial, read all the way through the instructions, like the paragraph. Like if it says, click on this button, don't click on that button until you finish reading what to do after you click on the button.
And there's probably still a lot of functionality and capability and power from it that I'm probably still not getting the most out of. I could probably really stand to do a little bit of a refresher on it.
Yeah.
So that's a commercial tool for doing scripting. Do you know of any for people who might not necessarily be able to afford something like this? Would regular word processor still be fine for scripting? I assume it would be, correct?
Yeah, absolutely, and also critical. And most, even something like Word or something like that, you should be able to find templates you can download that'll automatically do all the formatting and stuff like that for you. Struggling through that stuff is because I did screenwriting in college, which did not make me as wealthy or famous as I expected it would. Trying to struggle through that stuff and just using a typical Word editor can be really, really hard. So yeah, absolutely. I think there should be some shareware or free-ish programs that'll actually do all the layout for you too. And I haven't investigated that in a long time.
Scrivener is amazing, but it is a cult.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I know that at least for the scripts that I do, now obviously it's not as advanced as the Scrivener stuff, but I actually just use Google Drive and Google Docs to script my comics, and I have a very similar template like that I've put together that has page panel, description, character, stuff like that. So it's not that difficult. I think if someone's new to it, it shouldn't be that hard to find material or a template that you can work off of should you want to fit in one of those formats. But I think, like you were saying before, John, there isn't any particular right format for a comic book script unless you're submitting to a particular publisher. Is that right?
Yeah, and even then, a lot of times that's specifically for the submission process. Again, if you start working with the artist and you are communicating directly, then then all bets are off, because what they care about is that you get a comic out of it, not whether you follow their rules. Okay, so before we go too much further, there I actually would like to ask for the artists, what do you feel like you get from the artist-bride relationship? Because to me it's fascinating, because I can't draw my ideas. I mean, I could, but Happy Sun character, Stickman Adventures. I mean, is there?
You're asking more than a headache, right? No, I'm sorry. I gotcha.
Burn.
No, I'm kidding. You know what? I mean, it's
go
ahead.
Okay, so for Area of Great Wonder, I wanted to draw giant monsters, but I didn't. I was lazy. I'm too busy working on some other stuff. I'm like, I do not want to write this, but I want to draw giant monsters. So I just told John, I want to draw giant monsters, and it's pretty great because I get to just concentrate on that, and I don't have to worry about any of the stupid plot stuff. Like, I don't care.
Go right, monkey.
Yeah, and I just draw people running around going, no, and then buildings collapsing, and it's everything I want,
And I think that is something that I think does go to some of my philosophy of comic scripting is that, my goal is to sort of try and take since I can't take on that much more labor-intensive side, then my goal is to sort of take away the things that the artist doesn't want to deal with, and just sort of a function of, there's something you want to draw and you don't want to take on that work of plot and scripting and dialogue, then I like being able to help with that.
Yeah, because Ben, you wanted to draw science fiction, right? You were just like, hey.
Well, yeah, that's definitely one of my strong suits. Is I mean, I don't. Yeah, I wouldn't be any good drawing like a Victorian steampunk type of thing.
I don't know. Put a corset on that thing you're drawing right now. You're good.
At the end of
that. For me, honestly, and it's funny because this is something John says all the time, and I really like and appreciate this, and I don't think I did as much before I really heard you say this, but we get to make something together.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a culmination of two creative people making something. You know, if that's a comic book or something. I mean, it's something very tangible that's accessible. That, you know, at the end of the day we can both walk away and say, hey, we got this thing, we did. You know, I really dig that.
Yeah, I think actually, looking back, I probably if I update this, I might actually link to this. There's actually a really good podcast going on right now. It's not comics related, called Startup, from one of the guys who used to be on This American Life and Planet Money, and he's talking. It's basically he quit his job, working on the radio and internet content for NPR to basically start his own podcasting company, and he's basically, you know, talking about, and each chapter is just him talking about the components of that. And there's a chapter where he talks about why he went and got a partner for his company, and a lot of the discussion is, you know, he's going to divide up the equity. So he's going to give this other person, you know, some share of this thing he spent all of his time and energy building and getting financing for, and, you know, developing the infrastructure or whatever. And, you know, and the question is why and how much, you know, of the stake should he give them? And, you know, the conclusion he comes to, and I think this is what's really valuable, is the realization that doing any of this by yourself is really, really hard. And, you know, no matter what you have to give up, you know, it's almost always worth it to have a partner, to have somebody even just to bounce ideas off of, or to share with, or just, you know, I'm stuck, what do I do?
I would have given up years ago, I think, without you. I mean, even if we were just working on Bogus Street.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Jen and I have different complementary skills, and I think that plays a huge role in why we're able to do this.
Yeah, and when your patience and belief in yourself is at its lowest, your partner is all, no, we're going to go to the conventions, we're going to make all our money back. And, you know, maybe you do, maybe you don't, but by the time, you know, they carry you through those tough parts where you finally get back the will to live and draw, I guess. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and again, even that's just a big component of it is any kind of creative work it can be deeply emotionally draining. I mean, the number of writers and artists I know who feel good about what they're doing at any given time is negligible. So just having somebody else lets you know that it's not a complete waste of time and you're not a complete screw up. It can be a huge deal in of itself.
So if you ever need help, you just let us know, okay?
And I have noticed, though, that very much that is the case with a lot of people. When you're working on your own, when you're just kind of, I wouldn't say, well, I guess you could say toiling in obscurity. Well, you know, if you're producing something and you're kind of shut off from the world, shut off from input and stuff like that, a lot of times you can start judging yourself or the work you're producing very, very harshly.
Yes.
And so the teamwork aspect, or at least, you know, having people to beta read your material or to take a look at things really, really helps to understand. You're like, oh, so this story is good, or oh, so this picture doesn't look absolutely terrible.
Yeah.
You know, because and this is one myth that I've run into quite a bit, that I've noticed. Most artists, almost every artist that I've met, at some point or another looks at their artwork and goes, "Oh my gosh, this is terrible." When everyone else goes, "It's a masterpiece." I know I get that way a lot. Where I'm looking at something, I'm like, I can't stand it anymore. And then delete it, and people are like, no, don't delete it. But
I get that sort of where I'm like, oh, this is the worst thing I've ever drawn, and people are like, ooh, yeah, that could be better. So. But yeah, it is very important, and I think one of the big things, I guess, that we take home from this is that it's working in a team can be a very it can be trying, but it can also be a very, very positive and very uplifting experience.
Absolutely.
And that working with other people and interacting with other people can really help to bring a project to light that might not otherwise see the light of day. You know, you have a vision, but if you have the vision but you don't have the ability to, you know, execute that vision, finding someone to help collaborate with you and help you produce that vision, and then seeing the final piece come to life is huge. I mean, I remember opening up the box from the printers and pulling out the first issue, the first copy of my comic, you know,
You just
and
want to roll
looking.
around on it, don't you?
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, I remember my first published strip in the newspaper, and picking up the newspaper and seeing the strip and seeing my name next to the strip and going, I made this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is mine. And just that realization that comes with that, and you know, and you know, working with other people can be very vital to that production process. And then, you know, it's you made it. Yes, obviously, you know, you made it, but you all made it. You know, the team.
Right.
You know, you produced this thing together. It's a final work. It's a final piece. It's an actual physical, tangible thing. You know, that was once an idea is now a physical thing. It's just,
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a great experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, anyways, I think that we're going to probably start wrapping up here. Were there any final thoughts that you had, John?
The only thing I would say is just hit that key component that it is a team effort, and I think as long as people keep sight of that it is a 100% a collaboration. I think I think that's probably the key to success.
Mm-hmm. Did you have any other commentary, Ben?
No, I think we got pretty much covered it.
Mm-hmm. And how about you, Jen? Any last words before we do final business for the stream?
I guess if you're collaborating, I mean, that's kind of what we're talking about. The nice thing is that you can always blame whatever's bad on your partner and be like, oh, it's really wrong.
How did we miss that? I blame you, Jen.
Yeah.
It's his fault. It's her fault.
That's great.
I'm kidding.
Yeah. All right.
Like, just real quick, is this Destiny?
It looks like.
Doodling?
It looks like one of the Fallen from Destiny.
It does, doesn't it?
It's more like a spider thing, but
Okay.
I don't know. Just
That's
doodling.
pretty cool either way.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I've probably been shooting too many of those in Destiny, and that's why I see something with 4 arms, and I think, it's a captain.
Yes. Yes.
And actually, ironically, I haven't been playing Destiny at all, so.
Oh, Ben.
All right. All right. Well, I guess we'll go ahead and wrap up here then. So there are a couple of things we're going to be experimenting with here on Pen and Stylus. So normally we would have the Sketch Ink Repeat session, with the random character challenge directly following the Pen and Stylus show. But we've thought that because there was a lot of dead air and a lot of not saying anything, we're going to be experimenting with a new format, which is next Thursday. We are going to try a new version of Sketch Ink Repeat, and so I don't know if somebody else wanted to explain that, or if you guys want me to go ahead and explain what we're planning on doing.
1, 2, 3, not it.
I'm fine explaining.
Yeah, go for
But,
it.
all right. So what we're going to be doing actually is here in just a minute, and I don't know, Ben, would you mind bringing up the generator?
Oh yeah.
So we can run it here in a minute. Yeah. So what we're going to do is we're going to experiment with this for the next couple months and see if it works or if it doesn't work. But what we're going to do is we're actually going to, at the end of the Pen and Stylus episode, generate the prompt, generate the random character prompt, and share that with everyone. And then on a different day, we will host the Sketch Ink Repeat episode. But what we're actually going to do is offline between then, we are going to draw our challenge and record it. And then when we actually sit down to watch everybody draw, we're going to play those back as time lapses. So they'll be sped up. And then all of us will sit kind of and discuss process, and that way we can all kind of look at and analyze different people's process. The other reason for this, there are a couple other reasons for this, and this happens to be for opportunities for the audience to participate. Since we're going to be posting at the end of the Pen and Stylus episode the prompt, you, dear viewer, wherever you might be in the world, have the opportunity to draw your own version of the same prompt that we will be doing, and then post that picture. Either post it and send it to us via Twitter, Facebook, post it to our DeviantArt page, or our DeviantArt group, and then that image, if you submit an image, we'll select some of the images that are submitted, and we will share those during that actual episode of Sketch Ink Repeat. In addition, if you record a time lapse, and if we have sufficient time after going through the main time lapses, we might even feature a time lapse of your illustration and analyze it, and talk about your art. So if you want us to talk about your art, give you a shout out and stuff like that, please feel free to participate. The random character challenges do not have to be fully involved final images. I mean, they can be sketches, they can be ink. It's whatever you as an artist want to produce based on the prompt. And then we will, and a lot of this is so that we can keep the episode length to a more concise time frame, as well as have a much more involved discussion about the artistic process and stuff like that. And it'll make it also easier to field questions. If people have questions, we could talk about those, we can respond to those, and we can have segments where we go back and we can play things back a little bit more slowly and review things, show people
and hopefully
again what we were doing.
Hopefully actually finish things too.
And you'll actually see the piece from start to finish. Yeah, that's a big one. So anyways, that's what we're planning on doing. Have you run it yet, Ben, or are we ready to run it?
I can.
Okay, so we will generate the new prompt, the prompt for the next Sketch Ink Repeat, which will probably be next. My guess is either next Thursday or the 22nd, or Thursday the 29th is when that's going to be. One of those two days. We'll post the final scheduling for that episode. But if you want to go ahead and generate the new prompt, drum roll.
Okay. Did we decide we all want to do the same one, or?
Oh yeah, I think we're all going to do the same one.
Well, there you go.
That one? Okay. So a male alien who is a weapons expert who may be fierce. So that's a pretty straightforward prompt, actually. I thought we were going to get something really crazy, but that's fine.
I mean, that's the one I actually pulled up and kind of where I started with. Hold on. Started with that, but I forgot the heavy weapons part. But I mean, this is, like I said, this is more just me doodling than it is anything else. So.
Yeah. So for those of you who are interested in participating in that and having us feature you, and we will link back to your gallery or wherever else you want us to if you get featured. Feel free to draw, participate, share with us. We want to help us help you promote your stuff, I guess is what we're saying. So anyways, I wanted to extend a special thanks to John for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
It's been great.
Thanks, John.
It's been great having you. And we are trying to work on making sure that we incorporate more of just the whole artistic process, just the creative process in general, writing, illustration, and all of that, because this is all of this that has a lot of crosstalk, a lot of overlap.
Yeah.
And so
I was just gonna say, the packet has my email address, and any of the pen and stylus ways to get in touch with pen and stylus, the Twitter or the Facebook page or the DeviantArt. If you do have questions, please feel free to pass those on to me. I love talking about this stuff ad nauseum. So
Oh my god.
ad nauseum. Just on the nauseum. Sorry.
Yeah, no, not a problem. Yeah, and so yes, any questions, any comments, anything you'd like us to cover in an upcoming episode, please absolutely feel free to respond. Feel free to contact us. We very much like to have interaction with the audience, and share things with the rest of you that you want to learn about, what you want to find out about. And so I guess without further ado, I'll go ahead and share this. So anyways, thank you very much to everybody for coming. Thank you, John. Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Ben. And here on this page, you can see our Twitter, Facebook, and DeviantArt pages. All right?
Awesome.
So, this is Nathan Rackley, and then we've had John and Jenn Myers, and Ben Girven. And this is us signing off. Good night, guys.
Good night.
Right.